right, and with that, we welcome you to our CWOP series here. We are with the representing the California Worker Outreach Project, building efforts to engage Black workers and partners in Southern California around engaging them, educating them, and organizing Black workers, and doing work around Black worker justice, worker rights resources, building Black worker power, Black worker justice and healing. And we're super excited to have one of our friends and partners, Earthlodge Center for Transformation, and their team here. I'll pass it on to Cynthia, Yardina, Aaliyah, and I saw Queen too.
Hello, everybody. My name is Cynthia. Can you hear, first of all, can you hear me? I hope you can. My mute button says that it's looking good. My name is Cynthia. My pronouns are she, her, and revolutionary angel, and I'm really glad to be here talking to you this evening. So Earthlodge. Now, let's start with earth lodging. What is that? Now, it's a practice of going into the earth, like literally, to receive the healing that our Mother Earth has for us. Now, this philosophy comes from our Southern Black indigenous roots and is taught to us by our Earthlodge founder and lead land steward, Queen Hollins. So at the Earthlodge, we believe that healing is a right, and especially when talking about the Black and non-white communities, right? As we've been so separated from any notion that we have ancestral healing that we can draw on. We've been so separated from that. And at the Earthlodge, we employ a variety of modalities to bring that healing to us, to bring mental health, to bring spiritual health, and to bring physical health into us so we can have it right here and now. What we do is drumming. I wanted to drum for you here a little bit tonight, but we couldn't quite make the Zoom and the drum work, but we drum at the Earthlodge. We drum wellness medicine. We have meditation or sanghas. We engage with nature all the time. We get our hands into the soil because, again, so much healing comes from the earth. And we also do seasonal ceremonies. Now, our work at Earthlodge is intergenerational and Black-centered without apology, and foundationally about uplifting the community. So relationships like this are so important to us. So I'm going to go on to the next slide so we can really start to talk a little bit about our work, and I'm going to hand it on over to Dean.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Once again, in the spirit of being connected to nature and being connected to health, one of the reasons that we're a co-sponsor for this particular part in the Edu-Series is because of our centering of wellness. What brings us to the table in this way is centering not just Black people as workers, not just Black people with a right to wellness, but Black people with a right to be well at work. Here on this scene, you're going to see a graphic, a pictorial where we have condensed the experience of trauma in the labor force for Black people. So where did this analysis begin? The Earthlodge Center's healing justice. Most people would believe that the idea and work of worker rights will fall under socioeconomic justice. But without healing justice, uplifting the needs and the principles to be well at work, work shouldn't hurt, we would be lost and continue to experience a lot of the degradation and the ills in the workplace, many of whom our agency partners are here to address throughout this Edu-Series. So if you go back, we all, well, I don't want to say that, many of us on the call are aware of the experience of those of us who are part of the diaspora. This is just the pictorial for this country going back to 1619. These are some inflection points. These graphics will be available for the future. So I won't go through them in detail, but these are some inflection points of the experience, most of it layered with trauma of Black people in our experience in the workplace. Going back to absolute chattel slavery. Thank you so much, Elda. Going back to absolute chattel slavery, to Jim Crow, to the fight for civil rights and equality, to the rise of affirmative action because it still wasn't right, right? When it tried to get it right, it still wasn't right. To the hyper incarceration of our people, the war on drugs, the decreased amount of unionization, where we know that Black people found a lot of protection as workers. And then it fast forwards to our experience during COVID with Black Lives Matter, Moving for Black Lives, and the very public deaths of Black people. And once again, during COVID, being the last hired and first fired. Next slide, please. So that is where we were able to develop our particular project at the Earthlodge called Well at Work, Work Shouldn't Hurt, because of the legacy of trauma and pain that has been laced with Black people in our legacy of work, particularly in this country and around the diaspora. It's also backed up with research. These are slides that were taken from the Essential Stories Project. We were able to partner with the SoCal Black Worker Hub, UCLA Care at Work, and about at that time, 10 different community organizations to collect over 1,000 surveys. It may have even been 2,000. And Black workers spoke for themselves of what their experiences were after the pandemic. What do we see on these barometers? We see an overrepresentation of stress throughout the entire Southern California region. And we see that the stress is even very high when workers step forth in the Inland Empire and in San Diego. And the stress level for Black women was almost off the charts at very high. And for Black men, not far in front of that at 80%. So we know that going to work is not a peaceful experience for us. Next slide. And because we know that it's not a peaceful experience for us, Black workers call for Black worker wellness. They call for knowing more about their rights, and they call for support around the economic long-term integration past COVID. So that's why we're here. Next slide. That was where this particular project was birthed out of, understanding that we cannot just have healing and healing justice, but in order to be well at work, we have to have a combination of the two. So after that summary, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Aaliyah, to share a little bit more about how our modalities integrate both of these philosophies.
Yes, thank you so much, Yardina. And just to expound on that, work shouldn't have to hurt. You should feel good going into work. You should feel exuberant. It should be like your second home, because it's just that place you're going to give a large part of your energy, your life, your time, your space. So we're integrating that healing justice, okay? And just to sit with that for a minute, how does that feel to us? How does that look for us? Socioeconomic justice, okay? And as you can see here, this is just a myriad of excellence with the Earthlodge Center for Transformation, where we are using healing modalities such as spritzers, which is a type of aromatherapy. We're going out in the community. I see us here at a job fair, and we're actually teaching about plant identification. So it's a form of aromatherapy. We're using herbs from our community garden. So it's like we're allowing ourselves to self-soothe. Self-care is a modality that you're able to do yourself. And that's what we want to teach with the Earthlodge for the workers, that you could actually take items from a dollar store and heal yourself inside and out, okay? And so we're here at a Kwanzaa event. So we're bringing the traditions, we're bringing out the drums, and we're sharing the resources in the community and combining our wellness. And it's a wonderful experience to have, but the best experience to have is when you see the community and they're actually benefiting from these modalities. And sometimes you might see them in the street or at the grocery store and they're like, I got my spritzer. And that feels good, because it's like, that's something you can spray at the workplace, at your desk, and take a moment to breathe, take a moment to balance. Because when you're giving so much of your energy, the employer wants you to be balanced. You want to be mentally balanced. So this is a wonderful blending of this. And we need this. And this is self-justice, should we say. And this is something that we offer with the Earthlodge. We have in-person as well as virtual Zooms that you can just, from the comfort of your home, after work, you may not feel like stepping out. We also offer counseling sessions. So we're able to blend the two. Yes. Next slide, please.
Hi, can I get your name?
My name is Gates. First name Renisha, but I go by Gates. Pronouns she, her, they, them.
All right, Gates, welcome, welcome, welcome. We're doing little interviews of Black people, Black workers, talking about the importance of Black workers' rights and wellness, one of the campaigns of the Earthlodge and our partners. Why do you feel it's important as a Black person to be aware of not just your rights, but also your ability to be protected and well at work?
I feel as a Black person, I feel like there's a history of Black people being taken advantage of in the workplace, especially. And it's good to know because you never know, you think you're friends with your coworkers, you think the hand that's leading you has the best interest, and a lot of times they don't. I found out when I was working in corrections that was the case. I worked at Core Civic for 6 years as a correction officer, and I also did detainee transportation, and I found out that way that a lot of, in the private prison systems, they do take advantage of inmates as well as employees, and you find yourself signing those papers a lot, figuring out that the company doesn't have the best interests.
What do you do now?
Now,
what's your current work?
Now I'm a barber. That inspiration actually came from working with incarcerated people. I actually got my first pair of clippers from a barber that released, and I went to his barber shop after I didn't no longer work at the institution anymore. And I got my first pair of Andy's Masters, but they had a cord, but they are pretty expensive and a really good foundational, fundamental tool to have when you're starting out barbering. And that was my connection. Barbering is a passion of mine.
To wrap up, can you tell me, on the wellness end, are there tools? How do you see the value of the Earthlodge's contribution to Black people in being well, not just at home, but also at work? Do you use any of the tools you learn here in the workplace?
Definitely, especially even just like a lot of times I cleanse myself, my clients, I sage. When I'm talking to people, when I'm cutting hair, people talk to me a lot about what's going on. I can shield myself when I'm saging myself, but I also keep an open mind. Earthlodge has taught me to learn different perspectives and appreciate different cultures and appreciate different races and appreciate different people on that level.
And are you here working your craft this very day?
I am working my craft at the Earthlodge. I am cutting hair. This is where I stay. I come and I am affirmed to continue doing my craft. And I honestly say this feels like home. This feels like family. And anytime I need a little pick-me-up, I come through.
Thank you so much, Gates. Thank you so much for this interview. And Black Workers' Rights and Wellness Rising.
You're welcome.
Ashe.
That was gorgeous.
Yes, thank you. That was one of our gatekeepers here at the Earthlodge, and we were actually on site during that video, and we're able to share some of the healing and wellness modalities, and it's just been a fantastic run. So we appreciate this interview as well. Anyone else like to say a word or two from the Earthlodge before we go on?
One thing that I noticed about Gates is that in their story, they worked in traditional work and then transferred to the gig economy, into the self-employed economy. So there's more of a story there of the experience. They're not the only Black worker who has changed jobs because of experiences in the workplace. So it's time to suss that out. All right. That's about all I had to say, Leah. I think there was one more slide with resources. Maybe we can put that in at the end before we pass it on. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you all for sharing such a beautiful story and sharing about Earthlodge and the community and all the work that you're doing. So we're going to transition over into breakout rooms so we can have a little discussion. So we call this component Working While Black Breakout. And we're going to ask everyone when you go into the breakout rooms just to answer this simple question. Do you feel safe at work? If not, why? And we invite you all to get a little bit more intersectional by answering both questions, 1 and 2. One being share your experience around health and safety at work. That can be physical or emotional. And also number 2, have you been exposed to hazardous conditions? Did you take it to your supervisor? What were the results? We're going to have representatives from the Hub and Earthlodge in these groups to facilitate discussion. When we come back from the breakout discussion, we'll ask 1 or 2 representatives from the group to share, and then we'll ask you all to share in the chat. But we're going to go ahead and transition over and share the resources from the Earthlodge. So I'm going to turn it back over to you all.
Sorry, it's me. I was writing a note in the chat, but I'll come back to it. So at the Earthlodge, the resources that we have there, we have resources that for activities and events that we do on the land right there. The land itself is a tremendous resource. And then we have resources that we do out in the community as well. Some of the things that I brought up earlier that people are absolutely invited to come and take a part in are things like our seasonal ceremonies. When we change season from winter to spring equinox just happened. In a couple of weeks, we'll have our spring ceremony happening on the land. Our information's right there. Please go on to our website and check us out. Come through for spring ceremony. Get to talk about what are we birthing, what are we planting seeds for that we're going to take through the rest of the year with us. We have drum wellness medicine, right? The drum that was taken from our people when we got to this country because the oppressors knew how healing our drums were. Well, now as we reclaim that drums ourselves, put our own hands on the drums, we find how healing that is. We do sound baths, also healing through vibration, things that a lot of the time in this country, especially, we don't think these are things for us. We say, a lot of people say, oh no, that's white people kind of stuff. No, they are for us. And some of them are from us, and we don't know that they came from us. We have sanghas, which is meditation, mindfulness work to get us back in touch with being present and in our bodies. We have hands on the land, getting back, putting our hands in the earth. This weekend we start planting. We start planting our spring garden this weekend. Got a herb garden going in on the side. We're learning things like composting. We have a compost toilet that is the most beautiful compost toilet you ever want to see. I love to brag about it. Doesn't smell at all. People think outhouses, they smell. Composting, good thing to learn, and it's working on our land, right? We have limpias, which are cleansing through a heat, a sweat lodge, right? We have sound baths. I said that already. Gatekeeper program. So those of us who are being trained to also be land stewards, to also be able to train people and teach people about our ancestral learnings that we've got to bring forth into our lives, into the lives of our children, so that we can step into places like the workplace, right, with more of a fortified sense of self when we get there. Healing into the holidays. When the holidays come, a lot of people go down. For many people, the holidays isn't a really good thing. So we have a bunch of offerings right through November and December that can usher people through the holidays and really have people feeling good as they're crossing over into a new year. Out in the community, we go to festivals, we go to events. Last weekend, we had our Earthlodge kids were at the Long Beach Aquarium playing for the International Children's Day, right? Young people getting leadership training, how to teach other young people how to get their hands on drums, how to be in front of people, be able to speak in front of people, and learning this from young. And we also go out into the community. I'm part of the drum corps. We also go out into the community and we drum at events. So people can always come to us to learn, come to us for healing, and then come to us for figuring out how to participate in more of the things that we have going on. Oh, and we have a wellness guide. Dean, Aaliyah, anything that I'm missing that you would like to add?
We also have Queen Holland's hand raised as well.
Yes. Oh, is that Queen Hollins? Yes.
Yes, I would love for us to take advantage of this rare opportunity to have our founder close us out for 30 seconds. Thank you so much. Welcome, Queen. Thank you for
Thank you
sitting
so
here.
much. Yes, thank you, Cynthia. That was amazing, Dean and Aaliyah, for all those words. I just want to give, as a people, we have disconnected from nature, which was probably one of our biggest mistakes. African people are nature-based in everything they do. Our tradition, our food, hands in the soil. We've forgotten how to farm. We have, we don't want to get our Nikes dirty, and our babies don't want to get their Nikes dirty. Just don't want to get too dirty, and that very dirt is where just about everything that we have comes from our housing to our clothing to our food that sustains us, our water, everything comes from that place. So to be able to go back into the earth and rebuild the relationship with nature as a collective, we rebuild our infrastructure as people. Because right now our infrastructure is not connected to nature in the way that it needs to. The little boys that Cynthia spoke about have been drumming since they were 2. And so that drumming is going to serve as a different portal, because we know what's waiting for them. We know there's drugs, there's gangs, there's guns, there's all kinds of things, cages waiting for them. So to open up and reconnect with nature and create another option, which is something I really love about Gates, the person that we interviewed. Sometimes that pressure is so ridiculous that it pushes you into purpose. And now she has been off grid, doing her hair cutting, and she's her own boss. And so at some point, we look at the jobs that we have. Are these jobs that we really want to be in? Are these places that we really want to spend this much of our time? Do we want to give 20, 30 years of our purpose to somebody else's dream? And so, I'm hearing Martin talk right now saying, I have a dream. What is our dream? And create another frequency within ourselves first, and then within our communities, that we no longer magnetize, and I'm sorry to say this bullshit that we're dealing with racism. I just dealt with a brother this morning working at a car lot, and he said, I've only been here a week and I can't take it. This man was 66 years old. It's like integration never really happened. Equality never really happened. So, it's just, for me, it's time to look at things it's time to turn the page. What else can we create? Because we're civil rights movement, Black Lives Matter. What will it be in 10 years from now? What will it be in 20 years? What would our children have to march for in 20 years? So these modalities that we have, and I've spoken with Black people in the South, and they don't even claim African. They want nothing to do with it.
Queen,
Yes.
thank you. We have to transition. We thank you
I'm
so
sorry.
much. No, you're totally amazing. We thank you so much for being here as the founder of the Earthlodge. We do have to complete the rest of the presentation.
Okay. Well, I get very passionate about this because I know that we can dream a new dream. Ashe. Thank you so much.
Yes, Ashe.
Yes, I'm ready. I'm ready for Wakanda.
Thank you so much for sharing, Queen. We're going to transition over to our state agency rep who's on the call with us today, Brandon Hart. Brandon, without further ado, I'll let you take the floor.
All right, thank you, Darren. It's certainly a pleasure to be invited to an event. I know this is part of CWOP 4.0, but it gives us an opportunity at Cal OSHA to really connect with worker organizations and advocacy groups that really help out workers. Workers don't oftentimes have a voice. And so it's important that we participate in events like this to share helpful information, to help those who may be impacted through the things that you guys just described, to know that there are laws in place that do protect workers. Cal OSHA was created in 1973. It's in our state constitution, but it's based on the OSHA Act of 1970, which established federal OSHA in 1971. And we exist as a division to protect and improve the health and safety of both working men and women in California. And we do that through setting and enforcing standards. You may have heard about this recently, where we just passed a recent emergency temporary standard for silica. We're working on other standards related to heat. We're going to be enforcing a new regulation as it relates to workplace violence. And we're a very progressive state as it comes to passing regulations to protect workers. We provide outreach, education, and assistance. That's why myself and a couple of our team members from our outreach program are here. We have outreach team members located strategically throughout the state in geographic regions to connect with advocacy groups and connect with workers directly, because we understand as a government organization, as a government agency, oftentimes workers don't trust us. And for good reason. We are the government, right? But we actually exist at Cal OSHA to enforce those protections for workers. We also provide technical assistance to employers to help them understand what their obligations and requirements are. We issue permits, licenses, certifications. So building contractors and construction outfits can build those buildings so they can employ workers. And then we also issue registrations and approvals as well, like asbestos contractors that are removing asbestos or lead-based paint to ensure that it's being done correctly and safely by somebody trained and certified by the state of California. So it's a little bit about Cal OSHA. So I want to talk a little bit about the right to file a complaint. I mentioned that we exist for workers specifically, but the California Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1973 gives all employees in the state of California the right to file a complaint about workplace safety and health hazards with Cal OSHA. We are the agency that enforces that. And I'm going to go into detail a little bit later in the presentation about what some of the common complaints are and things like that. But I want you to know, as workers, when it comes to your safety and your health in the workplace, if you are an employee, not an independent contractor, but an employee, you have those protections, and Cal OSHA is an agency that will take those complaints for you. Cal OSHA can take those complaints through two methods. One, you can call the local Cal OSHA Enforcement District Office nearest to your work site. We have 26 district offices throughout the state. We also have a high hazard unit that conducts proactive inspections. And then Cal OSHA staff can discuss your concern, your complaint, maybe the hazards that you are exposed to in the workplace, and come up with a remedy for you. You can also email Cal OSHA's Enforcement District Office. There's a website that we're going to share with you in a little bit that provides that information. You can submit the zip code and connect with the nearest Cal OSHA office, because the website will direct you to that nearest enforcement district office. We talked a little bit about the gig economy. I heard that come up today a couple of times now, and the gig economy was something relatively new that we saw just in the past few years. Common jobs are related to like ride sharing activities, food delivery. We're now seeing more often since COVID-19. Everyone's becoming more accommodated to having their food delivered. Delivery drivers now that are working, for some of these delivery services, these courier services. These oftentimes were independent contractors and not considered employees, not provided with the same rights, the right to file complaints, the right to a safe workplace, the right to decent wages, hours, representation. That was the case until AB 5. So Assembly Bill 5 was signed into law in 2019 and became effective on January 1st, 2020. That's really given the same benefits and rights as traditional occupations, including workplace rights and benefits that Cal OSHA does enforce, and the Labor Commissioner's Office also enforces as it relates to wages and hours. I think now we'll turn it back over to you, Darren.
Thank you so much. I'm actually going to introduce Don Mockins, the director of the SoCal Black Worker Hub, to talk to us a little bit about the importance of organizing. Don, take the floor.
Thank you, Darren, and Brandon, on just the insight information around how some of our state agencies can help folks to address violations of worker rights. So I'm gonna try to keep this a little bit short, and there's just 3 quick slides, and you all will have copies of these slides afterwards in the whole recording, but you can get some of this from off of the slides. So one is just, there are so many workers' rights that we have on record, how they're being implemented, how they're being enforced, how folks who violate workers' rights are being held accountable by some of these state agencies. It's difficult. It takes 8 months sometimes just to get a hearing at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission when folks experience discrimination, right? Brandon, just by his own admission, said like some folks don't trust Cal OSHA or some of these state agencies, right? Yardena and Earthlodge just talked about other like non-current systems, right? Think about the current systems that we have in place and how many of them don't work, but our African traditional systems do, right? And so one of those methods that folks just talked about is how we're integrating healing and wellness and the definitions of what safety looks like for us at work is one modality. The other is organizing, right? But I'm gonna go back one slide, Melissa. Right, so all these various rights, right? Health and safety, workers' compensation, disability, fair wages, the right to unionize, the right to go on strike, right? All of these various workers' rights. And if you were on one of our previous calls with the Labor Commission, there was on their website, there was a list of like, I don't know, 50, 60 something other rights, right? So go ahead and fast forward, Melissa. And so when our rights are violated, there are so many, there are different things that we can do. File a claim is just one, and we know that that can be long and tedious and cumbersome. And luckily, right, working with the SoCal Black Worker Hub, we can help to streamline those processes for our members, for our worker centers and the hub partners, members and workers. But we know that like everyone doesn't have that access. We and your organizations can help support that, but generally speaking, we know it's the barriers exist and it's a challenge. So, right, you can also do nothing. You could deal with it, let it infect our bodies in all the various ways, right? We could just leave that place. Queen just said, do you want to give 30 years in an environment where we're having these internal conflicts with experiencing different forms of violations, right? So like you don't have to stay there. Find a place where you can be comfortable. Or some folks are like just straight taking legal action, right? And even then, though, we know that it could take years before resolution can be brought on by a legal suit. And then lastly, organize, right? We can organize. We can go to the next page, Melissa. Thank you. Organizing in our workplace. What does this mean, right? We organize to build power. We organize to leverage our strengths to address and resolve issues. Oftentimes, through organizing, we can resolve some of these issues, find ways to mitigate, negotiate resolution to these issues far quicker than waiting 8 months for an agency rep or 3 years for a lawsuit to come through, right? It's a pathway to build decision-making power. It's our ability to influence decision-making processes at work. It's a route to gain workplace corrections. And so when we think about organizing, and I'll close with this, like a couple of things that we want to ask is, this is an isolated situation, or are other folks dealing with this too? The first time I started to organize, before I knew that there was a language to organizing, I was working at a place making being paid by commission. the owners of the company changed and it went on the market and went off the market and all these changes. And we noticed our commission rate changing, and we started to talk to people in other departments and learned that it wasn't just us, because we were feeling isolated and alone, and like maybe it was just us 5 people in the photo buys, right? But no, because we went and talked to people in other departments, they were all experiencing it. And so it allowed us to build power just by communicating with each other about how far spread the concerns and issues were. And so lastly, like just, you know, and what do we need to organize effectively, right? What is the plan around this desired change, right? Do we know our rights around the violation we're experiencing? Do we have the will to make this commitment to see it through, right? We've got to communicate with management and be willing to, you know, believe that change can come from that and be strong enough to navigate those conversations. And so that is the other option, right? So it's not just, let's file a lawsuit, right? It's like not just, you know, we want to file claims to show that we also do need these state agencies, and we can organize in our workplace with our unions and in our communities to bring resolution to. So there you go, Darren.
Thank you for sharing. We're going to turn it back over to Brandon from Cal OSHA just to talk a little bit about knowing your rights.
All right, thanks, Darren. Yeah, so I'm going to dive in a little deeper through this next conversation. Let's talk about confidentiality. There's a big concern amongst workers about whether or not, if they file a complaint, will it be kept confidential, because retaliation is real. And so I'm here to assure you that all complaints filed with Cal OSHA are kept confidential. The entire form itself is kept confidential. We've been asked for copies of the complaint form itself, and we are allowed by law to redact the employee's information and anything leading to the of who that employee might be. So the name of any person who submits a complaint to Cal OSHA must be kept confidential by law. Cal OSHA does not share that information. Next slide. So let's talk about some of the common complaints, just to kind of jog your memory and help you understand kind of what we deal with on a common basis. So typically we'll get complaints from outdoor workers or those who, you know, are working in hot environments like warehouses, for example, where they're not being provided adequate water, may not be cool, may not be potable, may not be fresh. Sometimes it's stale water. A lot of times employees are required to go purchase their own water. That's not okay. They're not being allowed to take proper rest breaks for when they're working outdoors during the hot inclement weather. They need to be provided shade when they're working outdoors. So when there's a certain threshold trigger over a certain degree, like over 85 degrees, if they're working outdoors, the employer has to provide them with shade. They cannot work directly in the sun. So those are some common complaints that we get from workers who work outdoors. Also, we get complaints about employees not being provided training. For example, when they're related to chemical exposures or other safety and health hazards, they'll call us and say, I'm not being properly trained. I brought this to my supervisor's attention, and they're telling me just to deal with it. Employees are not being provided adequate personal protective equipment. Employers are required by law to provide hand protection, head protection, and body protection. So if their hands are exposed to anything that may cause burns or lacerations, the employer's got to provide gloves, protective footwear. It's oftentimes we hear about employees saying, I have to go purchase my own steel toe shoes or my own Kevlar reinforced, foot protection. If employees are working around equipment or machinery that would reasonably cause an injury to their feet, the employer is obligated and responsible to provide them with that personal protective equipment. Same with respiratory protection. We saw this through COVID-19. But many times employees are exposed to things like wildfire smoke when they're working outdoors, or respiratory illnesses, other aerosol transmissible diseases, and employers are not providing them with the proper personal protective equipment. These are a few examples of complaints that we receive from employees, and we act on these. Another one that we receive is employees who are exposed to potential workplace violence, robbery, assault. We talked about employees that are in the gig economy, doing these deliveries or ride share.
Hey, Jen,
They may be exposed to
are you
potential.
able to log in? Are you able?
So they may be exposed to potential workplace violence. Cal OSHA does have a law in place that protects those who work in social services. And then now we have this new workplace violence prevention requirement. It was SB 553, was signed into law in September. It takes effect on July 1. We've created a web page and lots of information and resources to help employees with workplace violence. Next slide. Let's go back one slide. There we go. Okay, so what does it look like after you file a complaint? So there's two ways that Cal OSHA can respond to a complaint. We can conduct an unannounced on-site inspection, or we can communicate to an employer through writing. So basically what that means is sometimes employers are like, well, you write my employer a letter. What does that mean? Are they going to know it's me? The answer is no. We do not give the employee information to an employer. We will inspect and investigate complaints if it's an imminent hazard or if it's a serious hazard, meaning there's a realistic possibility that it's going to cause serious physical harm, meaning hospitalization, amputation, any degree of permanent disfigurement. Something like that, we're going to respond to immediately and quickly on site. If it's something more minor in nature, like maybe the employer is not providing enough toilet paper, or the bathrooms are dirty at work, or something like that, where it's not going to create a serious hazard, but it may create a situation where it still is a violation, we may write the employer a letter and have them provide us with an acknowledgement that they've addressed that particular issue. Cal OSHA enforcement district offices will determine what it is precisely that they're going to do, if they're going to do an on-site inspection or if they're going to do a letter inspection, and they will communicate that with the employee. It's important that the employee who's filing the complaint provide as much information as possible about the complaint items, about the hazard location, about the time that these hazards exist, and who that inspector should talk to. So that way, when they're there at the site, they can adequately address those issues and concerns without having to talk to that particular complainant on site, which may give away their identity. So usually they'll have those helpful conversations before they actually go out to the site. Once they open an inspection, Cal OSHA has about 6 months to complete their investigation, statutorily by law to issue those citations. That may seem like a long period of time, but they are addressing the issue immediately when they're on site with the employer. It's just they have to gather evidence, facts, conduct interviews in order to properly cite an employer, so that way the citations hold up in the appeals court if the employer decides to appeal. With that, I will turn it back over to you, Darren. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for sharing all the information, Brandon and Don. So this component of the discussion, we're just going to do a quick scan of the room, and y'all can simply just answer the question by doing the hand raise function on the Zoom. But now with all of the information that has been shared from Earthlodge, Cal OSHA, and some of the people from the hub, have your worker rights ever been violated? And we'll take a few responses from people if you all feel open to share, if you want to share vocally. And then once we hear from a few people, I'll ask Brandon to answer the question, what to do if you experience violations. But go ahead and raise your hand, especially after hearing everything that has been shared on tonight's presentation. If you have experienced workplace violation, and if someone feels comfortable enough to share vocally, we invite you to do so. Nobody want to go?
I would encourage, if you have a concern, now's a good time to ask, because you actually have somebody from Cal OSHA here that can give you undivided attention. And you can even give me a what if scenario.
All right, I'll go ahead and speak about a situation that I had before. Working in warehouses, there's jobs that no one wants to do, like wrapping pallets, because it's dizzying, it's hard, it's tedious. And as one of few very few Black people there in a predominantly Hispanic warehouse. The Black folks all seemed like they always had, they were always assigned to do the pallet wrapping. Is there anything we could do about that? Like, is that a violation or a complaint that's valid for OSHA?
So it's, I guess the question is geared towards maybe you get a sense that the Black employees tend to have the less favorable jobs assigned to them. Is that kind
Yes.
of okay?
Yes,
So,
and you know, we actually had documented it, you know, to see, and you know, just to make sure it wasn't in our minds type thing, you know. And I think it was like 80% of the time it was one of the 3 Black people that ended up doing the shrink wrapping during their shifts, opposed to the almost 40, you know, Hispanics who didn't have to do it.
yeah, so that's a very good question. Thanks for sharing that. So that would not fall under a Cal OSHA jurisdiction, as it's not directly related to a safety and health hazard or violation. There's not a Title 8 regulation that allows us to enforce that. That is discrimination, though. If it's determined that there is an employment discrimination based on race, then that would be taken up by the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and they would be able to investigate that complaint. I believe it's the Department of Fair Housing that actually takes those complaints and can look into those for you and determine if whether or not employees are being given work assignments that are less than ideal based on their race alone. That would be a violation of the EEOC.
Wow, interesting. So Department of Housing would be the proper entity to contact for something like that.
I believe so, yes.
Yes.
It's certainly not under Cal OSHA's jurisdiction.
Yeah, this is James Williams of the California Civil Rights Department. That is correct. Will be the state's Civil Rights Department.
Oh, Civil Rights Department, not the Housing Department.
It used to be the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, and the name was changed July 2022 to the California Civil Rights Department.
Oh.
So we're still working on the branding and rebranding of the name, but most people do remember Department of Fair Employment and Housing.
So
Okay.
locally, the Civil Rights Department could probably assist. Statewide, it is the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. We'll find the link for you. We'll drop it here. And that was the agency I was referring to earlier, that oftentimes it takes a while to, you could file it online, but we'll give you the link here. You can file it online. And once you file it, are you in what region are you in? What worker center do you belong to? Or are you with Earthlodge or?
No, I'm with the High Desert Black Worker Center.
Great. Yeah. So we'll make sure that High Desert has the contact info with someone at EEOC who could help streamline your communication with them so that, our folks hopefully won't have to wait so long. You'll file your claim. One of them will get back to you to evaluate the situation, and then, and then they can assist you from there, and we can support that assistance if needed. Absolutely. There are no guarantees. Oftentimes, in fact, and this is why we talk about organizing, oftentimes it's an upward of like 80, 85, 90% of claims that get filed there that are what they call kicked back. Because unless it is blatant, clear, like damn near video recorded, every manager saying the N-word and we're doing this because you're Black type scenarios, oftentimes they won't take it. If they do, you will get a right to sue letter, and that's kind of the extent of it. However, especially in the Inland Empire, in fact, the EEOC, they took a case and just won, I think a year ago or a year and a half ago, one of the largest cases that they just won, like of several $1 million for Black workers who were experiencing that exact blatant discrimination. Like, people drawing the nooses and like all kind of other like disparaging images about
Yeah,
Black.
that was at Costco.
Oh, was
Mhm.
it Costco? I don't remember. Okay, maybe it was Costco warehouse. So, and so, but I think organizing also is the other approach. And so, yeah, so I don't want to overstep where you all are with High Desert Worker Center at the moment around what organizing can look like. We'd be happy to talk with y'all about what that could look like in terms of both in the workplace and in community. And like I said, file your claim with them, and then we'll make sure High Desert has the connect to support you to streamline your connection with them.
I think I saw Kirby had their hand up, but before I ask Kirby to speak, I do want to say that in the chat we dropped the hub has an impacted worker intake form. So you all can express like any experiences you have of your worker rights being violated. We'll have like Simone drop that in the chat again. But Kirby, I saw you had your hand up. I'm not sure if it's up now. Did you want to speak or ask a question?
Well, I really do enjoy sitting back and listening to this conversation. It is a vital conversation in Los Angeles, and it has been for the last 10 years, as far as I can see. I dropped into the chat an article about my industry, the movie industry. And 4 years ago now, our union president acknowledged that our union perpetuates systemic racism. And he pointed out a few ways that we do this, and I concur, that's how we do it, but we're still doing it. It's just an ongoing machine that, just loping down the field, ripping people up. And, I mean, the EOC in Los Angeles hasn't really been that keen on responding to complaints, and the whole system up and down the state just would rather like look the other way. So I'm just curious about how a situation that is this kind of blatant and in everybody's face can be addressed. I like the idea of organizing, but I'm just curious about it. That's all.
Brandon or
Curious
Don?
about the organizing?
Yeah, I was gonna say Don. He said organize. You want to respond?
Hi, Kirby. Kirby and I have talked over a couple of years about some of Kirby's direct experiences, and we know that like it's rampant throughout the industry, and tons of reasons why it's rampant. I'm not even about to bust all of that open right now, but we know it exists. We know anti-Blackness exists, right? We know the barriers that exist, and Kirby, I think like you know there are multiple approaches, and I think the question is like, what's the desired outcome that folks would be looking for, and who, right? Is it you and 3 other people? Is it 100 people, 50 people, right? How many people are in conversation about what's possible? And then what is the expected or desired outcome that folks want to see happen? And I think having those conversations amongst a large group of people or across the industries or across the unions or across the departments, right, is what has to happen. Because we know it's so broad and rampant, those deep conversations cross where it exists, I think is important. So that mass conversation about what desired outcomes and interests are will help determine who you need to target, what other type of support in terms of like other, you know, um, leverage points, right? Whether it be other organizations, the unions, community groups, right? Other folks who have connections to the state agencies to help hold them accountable, to assist, right? Then you can like move your strategy. Then you can move your strategy, right? And think about the tactics that you need to have in place to achieve those strategies. But I think those first conversations amongst the mass people with a collective understanding and agreement about the problem and what the desired outcomes are that y'all want to achieve. I think that's the starting place. And if you haven't done that yet, it would be difficult. So I think just doing that, which could take a little bit of time, is where folks got to be.
Thank goodness that interlocal organizing is happening. And the last count that I had, the last room I was in, there were about 300 people in there. But, there's a lot I don't want to take up a lot of space, but there are limitations to even what that number of union members can do, because I don't know, IATSE is an interesting union. It's an interesting union to be in. So they'll squash you like a bug if they can. So anyway, but I'm just wondering, like, even broader than that, like the agencies, how come the agencies are chilled out, you know?
I mean, we talked about this before too, like the more open and overt that the organizing efforts are, specifically around organizing around discrimination, right? An issue that's already, you already have protection there. As soon as you start to organize, if that retaliation starts to occur, that's your other leverage point, right? Because now you not only have a discrimination case, but now you have a retaliation case, right? That has other implications as well. So just throwing that piece out there too.
Just a little FYI, one of the groups that we organized with were responsible. We did a lot of effort to rescind the DA, Jackie Lacey. We wanted her not to be reinstalled, and we got our collective unions to rescind. They had given her the go-ahead, and we got them to rescind that. That was a lot of people, and that group is not around anymore because the payback is fierce. Jobs are perceived to be so scarce. It's a really interesting place to organize. At some point, we should have a deeper conversation about what some of the particulars are in IATSE. Anyway, I don't want to hold all the space tonight. I'm just so curious. This has been happening for years, since the 70s. IATSE's been, we'll get on it. And here's 2024, and it's the same issue that people are talking about 50 years gone. Anyway, thank you for the time, folks.
Thank you for sharing, Kirby, and everyone who shared. But before we move on, I saw Yardina, you had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Darren. Given the time, I just want to ask these as placeholder questions. If there's not a longer time to respond, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things while we have our agency stakeholders on the call. A lot of what the Earthlodge does is community resource fairs. So we're talking one-on-one in our marginalized communities. And a couple of things have come up that I don't have the answer for. And I have actually a follow-up question for you as well, Brandon, regarding the workplace violence piece. Black people are highly represented in the CNA field. And we know that our population continues to age. A lot of times we hear even just about the physical facility, how some things may be off or not up to par. My question is following up on Sir's question around workload. We often hear that, unfortunately, due to workload issues or what may be determined to be excessive workload in the CNA industry, where we have numbers and where there often is not a lot of unionization, that it affects the body. You'll end up going out early on disability. Is there a play here for Cal OSHA to document some of this and the wear and tear on the body? The second question that I want to put a placeholder on was around, what does workplace violence mean for the law that you were mentioning? We are also highly represented in the security industry, where the job is to protect and report. We're hearing more and more security officers say, hey, I'm starting to feel unsafe. I'm supposed to monitor these parking lots, and people are blipping these cars. They're just coming up blatantly, and it's my job to report vandals who are coming into parking lots, breaking windows, stealing things, and they think that I'm going to do something about it and be in harm's way. So is there something there for security officers who have this particular role when they are feeling unsafe from the expectations of their workplace? Is there a Cal OSHA play there as well? And the last thing that I want to mention, from whether it be our breakout group and what we've heard in the call, where does mental health, mental safety come into play? So time and time again, we've heard, whether it's on this call or when we're doing our work in our worker centers or our work in the community, hey, what I've experienced is not just an unsafe physical environment place. It starts to make my mind and experience unsafe. So where does that come into play? How do we address that? Is that able to be addressed through Cal OSHA? Where's that intersection? We know in the larger world, the interest and the need for mental health is expanding, the recognition thereof. and hearing how it affects the Black worker, is there something there as well? So just wanted to flag those, could be for follow-up later, just to bring real time where we have representation. You heard about the warehouse sector and things we've been hearing at the tables in the community.
Okay, I can address a couple of those quickly if I have time. Okay, these are good questions. So the CNAs, you know, we know that the nursing assistants they're huge workloads. So we've got a couple of standards we can look at as far as enforcing those. So there's three that come to mind. First one is under the Injury and Illness Prevention Program, under Title 8, Section 3203, all employers are required to identify, evaluate unsafe work conditions, take action is in regards to the procedures for correcting the unsafe work condition, and provide effective training. Those are three sections that we look at a lot. But besides that horizontal standard that is broadly used, we also have Title 8, Section 5110, which deals with ergonomics. So if we're dealing with, if what we would do as an agency is if we're getting complaints about nurses being overworked, well, we're seeing, you know, repetitive motion injuries, things of that case, then employers are required as part of their ergonomics program to evaluate and assess. And we would see that on the records that they maintain as far as their injury logs. And if we see a pattern there, and those are not being addressed by the employer as required under Title 8, Section 5110, then we could potentially cite an employer for failing to establish an ergonomic program, or if they've established one, failing to effectively implement that to ensure there are, you know, appropriate rest breaks, or putting in administrative procedures under administrative control measures of, you know, job rotation. So that way they're not utilizing the same body parts or doing something that's less fatiguing on them. So that way, there's a way employers can evaluate the hazards that are being created by this constant work, this constant repetitive motion. We also have a safe patient handling standard. So if they're lifting, you know, on a regular basis and it's causing strain to their back or to their you know, to their wrist or to their shoulders or to their arms, we do have a regulation that is enforceable for those that work in the industry. So those are three that come to mind very quickly. Surrounding that issue that you described. We would have to look at them in its totality, investigate, look into the situation, but there are some tools there that we can look at to try to enforce some regulations to ensure employees are not overly worked, overly fatigued, and then injured as a result. Second question you had was workplace violence. So workplace violence prevention, we did have one under Title 8, Section 3342 for healthcare industry, and also those that are, you know, like emergency medical technicians, EMS. This new one that was just signed into law by the legislature, it was Senate Bill 553, was signed by Governor Gavin Newsom, September 30th, 2023, goes in effect on July 1. It becomes in effect and enforceable, meaning Cal OSHA can enforce Labor Code Section 6401.9. It's a brand new labor code section, and it would cover these security officers. It requires all employers to look at the 4 different types of violence, type 1, 2, 3, and 4. Security officers could be exposed to probably 3, if not all 4 of those. The employers are required to establish a workplace violence prevention plan. They have to evaluate the hazards. They have to provide those necessary precautions, protections, train, have a violent incident log. Those logs are available to employees and their representatives. And they have to take certain measures to protect those employees from those particular hazards that they might be exposed to. The last item you mentioned was mental health. We don't have any existing regulation at this time dealing with employees that may be exposed to psychological or emotional trauma, although we could and may be able to incorporate that under the workplace violence, depending on the facts and the evidence that are collected and based on the circumstances of that event. But to give you more specific details on that particular issue, I'd have to go back and look up that information, and I can certainly get back to you on it. Those are all very good questions, though. Thank you for those.
Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you all so much. This was a wonderful discussion, a wonderful Q&A. So thank you for all the members who are on the call, who asked questions, and everyone who dropped those potential claims like in the chat. One thing I love about like having this series and inviting some of the state reps to come is because we get an opportunity to hear about some of those resources that we don't even know that are available to us. So I thank Cal OSHA so much for being here today. Thank you. So what have we heard or what have we learned today? We heard a number of potential claims here. I was watching chat throughout the presentation, listening, and of course in my breakout group, some of the things some of the attendees like share as far as like their worker experiences. And then we also was able to hear some of the healing and wellness at work needs for some of the people. And what made me so excited about collaborating with Earthlodge on this particular month, especially when we talk about workplace health and safety, is we always forget about the emotional piece. And it was so beautiful being in the planning and working space with Earthlodge, because one of the things they definitely was right on top of was like, let's talk about emotional safety because it's so important, especially us as Black workers. But other things we were able to learn, the process and what it looks like to file a claim, some of the common complaints that we come across as like Black workers in Southern California, but also ways we can go about addressing some of those violations when it comes to organizing, so we can really start building Black worker power throughout the region and in the future across the nation. Black people for everybody. All right. We can go to the next slide. All right, so here, oh, go ahead. Go ahead now.
The question in the chat, Darren, by Simone.
Oh, and thank you for putting this in there, Simone. And thank you, Don, for telling me. So Simone just dropped in the chat, drop a 1 in the chat if this is your first time hearing these kinds of resources to us. So go ahead and do that. I'm gonna drop a 1 because I know I didn't hear some of it myself. But also we have some more helpful resources. Like I mentioned a few moments ago, and if you were watching the chat, we do have the impacted worker and intake form. If you are a Black worker who have like experienced any kind of violations or believe you have, and you want to talk to your respected worker center in your region, go ahead and click the link. I think we have members from the hub dropping in the chat as we speak. You can go ahead and take a look at that, fill that out. We also offer additional agency resource guides, and we have a wellness guide, a new one that's coming this year. Earthlodge shared earlier in the presentation, the You Good Wellness Guide from, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, if it was last year or the year before that. Like last year. Okay, the You Good Wellness Guide from last year. So that is accessible to everyone. And again, we'll be sending out this presentation to everyone, so you'll be able to actually click the links and go to those resources. And also, just for more information on the Echo Black Voices Power Building sessions we'll be having for the rest of the summer, you can also visit the link there for more information. We can go to the next slide. So what's next? We have some upcoming events and programming. So our next Echo Black Voices Power Building session will take place April 24th. So again, the last Wednesday of the month, same time, 6:30 to 8 p.m. And we'll be covering wage and hour with another partner, Black Women for Wellness. And we will actually have the Labor Commissioner's Office. I don't know if they're still on the call. They will also be the state rep that will be present in the space. So mark your calendars for that and go ahead and RSVP for the next session on April 24th. And if you felt compelled tonight after hearing other worker stories, or if you felt moved and inspired to share your story, we will be doing a docu-series starting this summer. You can click the link there if you're curious, or talk to your respective worker center about sharing your story, and we'll be reaching out to the worker centers and coordinating that. I want to invite our partners just real quick before we close out, if y'all have any upcoming events that you would like to share. Any partners we have on the call? Make it quick though, y'all.
Hey, just real quick, Darren, to encourage folks to not only RSVP, but tell all your people about next month's event, because the industry that's being focused on next month is not only like traditional healthcare, but it's our doulas, like our, westernized non-traditional, but our African traditional healthcare workers who often are paid disproportionate to the traditional healthcare workers in the healthcare industry. So learn about the industry, learn about how doulas function and the challenges that they're facing to get equity in this industry. So just let your folks know.
Thank you for that, Dawn. Thank you. Earthlodge, did you want to share any upcoming events you got?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. I was just putting it in the chat. In the chat, we at the Earthlodge, we have got Hands on the Land coming up this weekend. This weekend on Saturday, we will be building the second part of building our compost on the land there. Next Saturday, April 6th, will be our spring ceremony. So come through for spring ceremony. That's one of the anchors of the Earthlodge. We never miss a ceremony. Queen leads us through our ceremony and welcoming in the spring. That happens next week. You can always go onto the website, earthlodgecenter.org, and find out everything we are doing. So come through and visit us. You will love the land.
Perfect. Any other partner before I talk about Black August want to share? I know we had LA here, we got HD here. Anything y'all want to share?
Yeah, anybody in the LA area, if you want to come to a membership meeting, come join us Saturday morning, come down at 10 o'clock to the office at 5350 Crenshaw.
Yep, I'll add Black August. It's Black August, right? It's a month of resistance, a month of uprising historically. And so we'll be honoring and celebrating the month with an in-person gathering and education and sharing the results of sharing the final docuseries, although there'll be some small clips of it that'll be shared out by social media up until August. But we'll also be sharing out the results of a regional survey of Black workers that'll be coming out soon. So we'll share the results from that. We hope to have some decision makers in the House, some other influencers in the House who will be receiving the word of Black workers and how we're building Black worker power in the region of SoCal. So just save the month, a date to come and location to come, but spend Black August with the SoCal Black Worker Center.
Period. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. We really, really hope that you found all this information helpful in some kind of way. I want to say thank you to all of our partners in the region, our entire regional network for CWOP 4.0. I want to give a special shout out to Earthlodge tonight for leading us in discussion as the co-host. Really, really thank you all so much because this wouldn't be possible without you all tonight. And of course, our state agency rep, Cal OSHA, for being here. Thank you so much. Yeah, y'all, stay.
Darren and Dawn, is it possible, and let me know if it's okay if we can share that there's efforts to make CWOP permanent through CCWP. Is it all right to announce that?
Absolutely.
I was like, the way Dawn leaned in, I was like, I think it's good.
Yeah, totally. So we all know that the California Worker Outreach Project, CWOP, was started out of reaching impacted workers, hard to reach workers through the pandemic, but there's an effort and policy being pushed, a Senate Bill 1030 that Senator Smallwood Cuevas is also supporting to help make it permanent, to help shift those funds out of healthcare. Because if the state had it their way, they'd be like, oh, pandemic's over, we're no longer funding this. No, yes, you are, because they committed to funding, to allowing this funding stream go towards a continuation of doing outreach and engagement and worker education around general worker rights issues, not only around the pandemic. So there are a number of lobby days that are coming up on April 10th. And then in May, there is a gathering of representatives of worker centers all over the state who are coming together at UC Davis. And then we'll be talking with legislators on May 15th about making this project permanent. So thank you, Yardena. Yes, and folks are welcome to join in these efforts too.
When you get that kind of call from us, answer that one too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question, Yardena. You're so amazing. Thank you everyone for coming out and attending. I'm gonna echo Dunn. Definitely tell your friends for the next one. Bring a friend, phone a friend. come show love and support and get educated. Stay connected with us by following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And yes, we will be seeing you all soon, hopefully. Thank you all so much. Ashe, everybody.
Thank you so much. Ashe.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.